Hey there everyone, welcome to the Sky This Month for May of 2025. My apologies to you all for not being able to get out an Sky This Month article for this month. Unfortunately, April was an extremely busy and hectic month for me personally and professionally, and I just wasn't able to get that article out in time. Huge thanks to Bob Christmas though for stepping in and putting one in last minute for all of you, and I really appreciate that, Bob. But like I said in the sent a short little blurb, I will be giving a extended Sky This Month article in June, as well as an extended Sky This Month presentation at next month's meeting, which will cover the entire summer from June until September. So you can look forward to that. But for now, we'll get into May of this year, 2025, and finally the nice weather is upon us. It feels like spring, the days are warm, and that's great for us observers because it means we don't have to deal with the cold and the wet of March and April. But unfortunately, that also means that the days are getting longer and the nights are getting shorter, so we have to stay up later and later to get those nice clear dark skies. Now, before we get into the usual night sky tour on Stellarium, we have quite a few photos that were sent in to us this month from the membership, so we'll get right into that. The first photo that I have here was sent in by Lorraine Schnur, and this was taken on March 12th at 7:55 p.m. And this is a beautiful photo here of ripple clouds. So I'm not sure if any of you have ever seen these before. Altocumulus undulatus clouds, ripple clouds. They're a fairly rare phenomenon to see the clouds making a formation like this, but it's always extremely striking, especially when you don't expect it and you're driving down the road and you look out the window and you see it looks like a ripple of waves up in the sky. And this is a fascinating phenomenon. Doesn't happen too often, but when you do see it, it really is just a stunner and an eye catcher. And this is a great shot from Lorraine. Thank you for sending that in. And again, one of those things you can't really plan for. You can just hope to see it when it happens. The next photo we have here is from Ken Leadham, and this is of the North America Nebula. So Ken said that he went out in the early morning hours of April 17th hoping to capture Comet Swan, but that proved difficult and in the end fairly unrewarding because the comet was very low in the horizon, an hour or so before the sun washed it out. So no fault to Ken, of course, it's very difficult to capture anything, let alone a comet. But he said that he took out his Dwarf 3 scope, and while he was waiting on the comet, he set it up and took this image of the North American Nebula. And of course, the North American Nebula is in Cygnus, and it's a nice, big nebula that covers a large area of the sky. So it's not so much a visual object, more of a photographic object. You can see it through binoculars or a telescope on a very dark, clear night, but even then it's definitely more of a photographic object. And this is a great photo from Ken here. You can see the outline of the nebula here. You have the North America shape in it. You got Florida and Texas down here. Looks like the USA with its dark dust lanes clouding around over here and a nice bright pinpoint stars. Wonderful image from Ken. So another one here also submitted by Ken is the Pelican Nebula. And this was taken from 15 minutes worth of frames taken with his Celestron Origin using a dual band filter on January 9th. And the images were processed using free software Graxpert, Cyril, GIMP, and SETI Astro Cosmic Clarity. And the Pelican Nebula is another nebula in Cygnus. And it's an H2 region. And it is associated as well with the previous image, the North American Nebula. And it's a great photographic object as well. And this is another fantastic shot from Ken. I love the deep red colors that he's captured in this image here. And finally, another one from Ken, or rather another two. And Ken says, since we're pretty much coming to the end of our time for capturing Orion this year, he attached a couple images that he managed to capture in March of the Orion Nebula as M42 and M43. So up here you have M42, the heart of the nebula, right up here on the right side, and down here above it in the sky is M43. And this, of course, is another emission nebula and probably the most famous night sky object. And this wider field image was taken with my most recently acquired scope, a Vespera Pro, 15 minutes of exposure on March 26th. And it shows the Orion Nebula and the Running Man Nebula, as M43 is known, took the image with no filter on the scope. And he said, as I took this, I tried with a dual band filter that prevented the result from showing the reflection nebulosity. So fantastic images as always from Ken. I really appreciate you sending those in, and keep sending them because they are awesome, awesome pics. Next up, we have a couple images from Bob Christmas, our EH editor. The first one here is of M1, the Crab Nebula. That is a supernova remnant, and it is in Taurus, and this was taken by Bob on March 17th of this year with a ZWO C-Star S50 from Burlington. Noise reduction on the spot using a C-Star's Android app, and 27 minutes and 50 seconds of exposure time in total. And you can see the filaments in there of the wispy parts of the nebula, the supernova remnant, and that's a great photo from Bob. It really captures what it looks like in a large scope as well. And the second image from Bob is of Mars and the Beehive cluster in Cancer, and that was taken on April 27th, and just the last few days Mars has moved through M44, the Beehive, so I hope somebody else has a photo to send in next month of that. I'm sure one of you guys took it, but here Bob has this great image of Mars making its approach to the nebula. And this was taken from Spectacle Lake near Barry's Bay, Ontario. 20 minutes total exposure at ISO 800. And that was taken with his Canon 40D through a 100mm lens at f3.5. So great image as usual, Bob, and appreciate you sending those in. Next up, we have a few photos here from Chris Jabon. And so he said the terrible weather this past month has been preventing him from taking a lot of photos, but he says he's been trying to image some of the Messier objects he's not yet captured. So Chris took this wide field image of the Virgo cluster last spring with a 135mm lens, and he ran it through astrometry.net in order to annotate it. So as you can see in here, he's got this wide field image, and he's went through and added labels for all of the different IC and NGC and Messier objects that he's captured in this image. And that's a really cool shot because, again, just taking a look at it without all of these labels, you'd assume most of these deep sky objects in here are just stars, but no, they're mostly galaxies right deep in the heart of the big populous Virgo cluster. So that's a really cool image from Chris. And moving on to his next shot, which is similar, we have down here, had to make it a little smaller to fit it in here, but he took another wide field image of the Virgo cluster around the area of M100, Messier 100, a nice beautiful face-on spiral galaxy. And he's actually framed it here where you can see in the bottom right image, zoomed in to the actual photo of M100 and NGC 4312. And that was taken in a 6-inch Celestron Nexstar 6SE and his ASI 294MC Pro camera. And it was about 3 hours worth of imaging time, and he was imaging from Milton, so it is difficult, of course, taking these pics from Milton because of all the light pollution, but nonetheless, great result in the photo, especially from those light polluted skies with a relatively small scope. So great pics from Chris. And then finally, also here we have the same thing, another wide field image with the framed area of Messier 90, that is M90. So right there you can see in the bottom right image where it is in the sky in the cluster, and then up here taken through his 6SE with 1 hour and 54 minutes of exposure time. And he said he also tried for M88 and M99, but the sky conditions were just so poor the detail wasn't there. And yeah, it was a brutal, it's always brutal trying to take pics in the spring because if it's not raining out and if it's not cloudy out, then you're getting some pretty garbage, bad seeing, low transparency skies. But I think the results that Chris got here are really good and really cool, matching it up from the zoomed in images of the galaxy with the wide field shot. So that's our pictures for this month, submitted by membership. And as always, like I say, if you have any pictures that you want to send in, any sketches, any cool stories, anything you want to share with me, you can send those along to observing@amateurastronomy.org, and I'll be happy to share it during my Sky This Month presentation. So now we'll move on to our night sky tour of the latter half of May and the first couple weeks of June on Stellarium. So we'll get over to Stellarium right here, if I can. There we go. So I have stellarium set here for Friday, May 23rd. That is 2 weeks from tonight, halfway between now and the next meeting. And because the nights are getting longer, I have the sky set to 11 o'clock p.m., a couple hours after sunset when the sky is starting to get really dark. So we'll start off, as we always do, over here in the west. And we have the last traces of the winter sky fading away into the swampy horizon before finally setting for the summer. We have Gemini over here with Castor and Pollux about to set. Following behind it is Cancer and the Beehive cluster and the head of Hydra, with Leo and some of the spring constellations following suit behind them. Looking further up towards zenith, we have the Big Dipper in Ursa Major here with Canis Venatici and Coma Berenices right here, right up in the zenith. So, as I mentioned last month, you also have the Virgo cluster and the Coma cluster and all the dozens and dozens of galaxies in this area of the sky, high up towards the zenith all month long, still making for great viewing opportunities. And then moving down towards the eastern sky here, we have Ophiuchus, Scutum, Aquila. You have Scorpius, Libra, all of the summer constellations finally starting to come up after disappearing for the winter. By 11 o'clock, Lyra and Vega are nice and high, and then Cygnus is almost fully risen above the horizon. So the later you stay up in the night, the higher and higher those summer constellations get. Of course, not a priority right now for May, as you have the whole summer to see them, but nonetheless, they are rising, and with them, the summer Milky Way coming up nice and quick. And of course, you have Hercules and Corona Borealis here, and the head of Draco nice and high in the sky as the sun sets. So to start off, we have the moon for this month. So tonight is the 9th. We have full moon on the 12th, that is the coming Monday. And then we have third quarter moon on Tuesday the 20th, and new moon again on the 27th. And then in June, first quarter moon on the 3rd, and then full moon again on the 11th, the Wednesday night before our next meeting. Now the moon for this month has quite a bit going on for it, so let me pull up the moon here. And I will go back to our meeting date. Apologies for 1 second. We'll go back to the 9th here and bring it around. So, on the 9th. Oh, 7 a.m. My bad. Second, my apologies. Let's get the moon back in here. There we go. Okay, my apologies. So, tonight is the 9th, and as you can see, after the sun sets and the sky gets dark, we have the moon right there in Virgo, right next to Spica. Spica, of course, being the brightest star in Virgo. This is at 10 o'clock over here in the southeastern sky, and there is the moon just a couple of degrees away from Spica. Moving on to the night of the 22nd and the 23rd. Let's go further on. And I should have said the morning of the 22nd and the 23rd, just before sunrise. Over here we have a nice conjunction with Saturn and Venus. So here's at 4 a.m. in the eastern sky, just above the horizon on the morning of the 22nd, and then we'll skip ahead to the 23rd, and the moon joins Saturn and Venus and the rising sun right there in the eastern sky. So that's going to make for another great photo opportunity. And of course, you have, while you're looking at the moon, obviously take a look at Saturn and take a look at Venus, and Neptune is also thrown into the mix there, and I'll get to that in just a little bit. Continuing on to the 31st. in the evening. So we'll skip ahead here. And in the evening on the 31st, again around 11 p.m., you have the moon right here between the Beehive cluster and Mars, nice and close in there together. And then the next night on June 1st, you have a very close conjunction here with Regulus, the brightest star in Leo. Real close conjunction. That's about a degree away from each other. So that's a cool telescopic sight, a cool binocular sight, and a cool photographic sight. So lots going on with the moon this month and lots to see. And we will move on to the planets now, starting off with Mercury. Mercury is an early morning object for the first couple weeks of May, and then the next couple nights after the meeting. We'll go back here to the 9th, rather the 10th in the early morning, and Mercury is just rising as the sun is rising. So it's definitely a challenge for the next few days. Definitely will take some skill and some luck and some clear skies and a very clear horizon to try and pick it out of the swampy early morning sky. And after about the 12th or the 13th, it begins to move towards superior conjunction with the sun on the 29th, which means that for the rest of the month you can consider it not at all visible because it is too close to the sun, obviously. Moving on though, Venus all month long is there in the morning sky, and it is a bright, bright early morning object. Magnitude -4.65, which means it's incredibly bright. And as the month goes on, it gets higher and higher and higher and rises earlier and earlier and earlier. So right now we're on the 10th at 5:30, but we'll head back to around 5 o'clock, and you can just see as the month goes on, Venus will be there in the morning sky, joined by the moon again, 22nd, 23rd, and all month long until our next meeting, plenty and plenty of opportunity to see Venus. And of course, if you have a scope, as we all know, you can actually see the phases of Venus. So you can see a crescent Venus and a waxing and waning gibbous Venus and a full Venus, because it is inside of the Earth's orbit, and therefore it has different phases, much like the moon and Mercury does. Moving on to our next planet, and actually let's move forward a little bit so we're not jumping all over under the horizon, and we'll move back to the 13th. Mars. The red planet is still visible all month long. It is moving from Cancer to Leo in the western sky in the evening. So let's go to after sunset. And you can see right there, Mars, the red planet. And as the month goes on, it drops lower and lower, eventually setting around midnight or so, between midnight and 1. But still, until our next meeting, plenty of opportunity as well to see the red planet. And as always, a large enough scope. Even though Mars is very, very small this pass around, you may be able to pick out a few features on the planet. You'll definitely see that deep red color in the disk. And of course, it's too very difficult to see moons Phobos and Deimos. You'll need big aperture for that, dark and steady skies, but always worth a shot if you're rocking a 8, 10, or 12-inch Dub. Moving on to King of the Planets, Jupiter. Back down under the horizon we go. My apologies to everyone, of course. But Jupiter is still visible in Taurus. It's low in the western sky, as you can see here. This is on the 31st at 9 o'clock. We'll move back a little bit, though. For the next couple weeks after the meeting until the end of the month, it is still visible low in the western sky after sunset. It's sets around an hour or two after sunset, and by the end of the month it'll probably be too low to see much detail, but it is still there for you for the next couple weeks if you've missed any opportunities in any viewing of Jupiter over the last couple months. Now we'll head back around, and I'll try and be less jumpy for you folks. We'll get over there on the eastern sky, and we'll go to the early morning. once more. I know I'm jumping all over the place here. We'll move up a little bit here, back around 5 o'clock. And there you can see the next planet out from Jupiter, Saturn. So Saturn is there with Venus in the early morning sky. It rises around 4 a.m. and it gets higher and higher as the month goes by. And it rises earlier and earlier, obviously. So the ringed planet is making another pass around. Haven't been able to see it for a while, but now if you're an early riser and you got some clear morning skies and you got nothing to do before work, or you work up early, train your scope over there on the eastern horizon. You have Saturn with all of its many moons, and it's nearly edge-on rings this time around the sun. So that's going to make a great target for astrophotographers and for visual observers alike all month long. In the mix of all of this is also Neptune, as I mentioned. Neptune is right there, just a few degrees away from Saturn, and it follows the same path as Saturn all month long, rising just before sunrise and getting higher and higher as the month goes on. And Uranus, as well as Mercury, in conjunction with the Sun, so it is not visible this month. So moving on from the planets, we'll take a look at our deep sky for this month. We'll head back to the 23rd, 2 weeks from tonight, and we'll head towards the evening. Same thing, same time, around 11 p.m. So as I mentioned, the summer constellations and the summer Milky Way are rising, but for those who don't want to stay up until 2, 3 a.m. when they're placed the best, and you don't really need to because they will be up earlier and earlier as time goes by into the summer. But we have for ourselves this area of sky here, which is going to be the focus for this month. And this is an area of the sky that doesn't have all too many big, bright, famous objects, but there are a few very well-known ones, and there are quite a few globular clusters. This is a good month for bagging some globular clusters. So in between Bootes down here, or up here rather, and Scorpius and Sagittarius down along the horizon, you have several different globular clusters that you can see. We'll start off up here high in the sky with M3. That's a magnitude 6.3 globular, which is nice and easy to see. Nice big bright one. You can get that in binoculars. You can get that in any scope. And that is in the constellation Bootes. Over here next to it we have NGC 5466, the snow globe or the ghost globular cluster. Now that's more of a loose one, and a certainly dimmer one at magnitude 9.7, but still easily obtainable in pretty well any telescope. Over here, apologies for the jumpy mouse, I don't know what's going on tonight. Over here at Como Berenices, you have M53 at magnitude 7.7. That is another bright, easy, and dense globular. Right beside it as well, NGC 5053. That one's magnitude 10. Dimmer, harder to see, but nonetheless, right next to M53, you should be able to find it with a big scope and some dark skies. Coming back out here, we move on over to M5, that is the Rose cluster. The Rose cluster is magnitude 5.7, so it's even brighter than M3 in Bootes. And that's a really good globular cluster to get in pretty well any scope and in your binoculars, and it's in the constellation Serpens. And that is a very, very nice one, very dense, with a nice bright ring of stars circling around the core of the globular. Now, I don't know what's going on with stellarium here, but that's not what it looks like. Those stars are not that bright in the globular, but they're still quite noticeable, and it makes for an interesting shape and an interesting view through your scope. Heading back out here, we go into Hercules. Hercules, of course, has probably the most famous globular in the sky. That is the great star cluster in Hercules, the Hercules globular, that is M13. M13, again, probably the biggest, the brightest, and the nicest that you can get in the summer. And at magnitude 5.80, it is honestly from a very dark sky, and if you have good eyesight like I do, you can actually see it with the naked eye. And of course, in binoculars, you'll be able to definitely see that, and you can definitely differentiate it from the stars around. And in pretty well any scope, you'll be able to break up the stars into it, and it just always is a fantastic, fantastic view. And this is one of those objects that if you're showing off to a friend or a neighbor or a family member and you want to show them something cool, just put on some medium or high magnification in your scope, go find M13, and pretty well guaranteed they'll think it's one of the coolest things ever because you'll see all those hundreds and hundreds of stars. M13, great globular. And over here as well, at the head of Hercules, a little dimmer, a little smaller, M92, but another great globular to bag while you're looking for all of these clusters. Moving down a little bit into Ophiuchus, you have a couple more over here. You have M10, magnitude 6.6, M14, magnitude 7.6, M12, magnitude 6.10, M107, magnitude 7.8. More good globulars that are attainable in pretty well any scope. And then coming down towards the horizon, we'll move a little bit ahead to midnight here as they rise a little higher. And you have plenty more to see. You have NGC 6356, you've got M9, you've got NGC 6235, you've got NGC 6284, M19, M62, the great M4, M80, NGC 5986, M28 over in Sagittarius, NGC 6553, and you also have M22, magnitude 5.2. And those are all magnitude 5 to 8 globulars. So as you can see, prime time of the year for your globular hunting, all the way from high up in zenith down to the horizon. And you can spend hours, of course, in this area of the sky, not just seeing your globulars, but also any of the galaxies lingering over here in Virgo and all of the summer Milky Way nebula that are down here in Sagittarius. So plenty to see in the month of May, plenty going on in the sky. You can see most of the planets, you can see some conjunctions with the moon, and you've got tons of deep sky objects to look forward to. So head out there, hopefully we have some nice clear skies, and let me know in June what you've seen and what you've taken pictures of. And until then, happy observing, happy deep sky hunting, and clear skies. We'll see you next month.